Hello, everyone, and welcome to the University of Rhode Island Computer Science and Statistics. In today's lesson, we are going to talk about configuring your initial configurations for your Windows Server 2019 using PowerShell. PowerShell is one of the features that has been around in Windows since Windows 10 and Windows 8, and it is one of the in my opinion, most underutilized tool that exists in the Windows operating system. It has a lot of benefits and a lot of similar configurations to that which you would find when you are running a Linux system. So let's take a look at what I have here. Here on my screen here, this is a clean install of a Windows Server 2019. Once you first install your Windows Server 2019, one of the things you're going to have to do that is different in Windows Server 2019 is automatically by default, you are an administrator. So the first thing you need to do is set up an administrative password, which I am going to do. And once you do that, you're going to click finish, and you're going to allow your configurations to fully install and allow you to launch into your system. So I'm going to log into my Windows Server 2019 as an administrator. So right now, my Windows Server 2019 is getting everything set up and configured. And one of the things you might run into when you first install your Windows Server 2019 is you might run into the issue where your Windows Server VM doesn't really recognize the ISO. And that is perfectly fine. Just point to it, click enter when it says to boot from CD or DVD, and you should be fine. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to install VMware tools, because the VMware tools are really what's going to allow us to really maximize the full functionality of our server. So I'm going to run and get my VMware tools all up and running so that way I can take a look at the configurations that I am going to change and configure in my Windows server through the PowerShell. Okay, I'm going to do a typical install of the VMware tools. And remember, to install Windows Server 2019, you need at least 2 gigs of RAM free and at least 60 gigabytes free of hard drive space in order to complete this week's assignment. So if you don't have it, definitely go to one of the labs and complete this assignment. So once I finish, it's going to ask me to restart my server so the VMware tools can take effect, and I am going to do so. All right, and the reason that VMware Workstation doesn't detect Windows Server 2019 is because it's not really built into it yet, but I'm sure with the updates and the upgrade that VMware will be releasing soon, that issue should be fixed relatively. So don't be afraid when you check and you notice that you don't have, nor do you see, a Windows Server 2019 detected by your VMware when you first point to the ISO and try to install it. Okay, and the installation is similar to your Windows Server 2012, 2016, and 2019. They're all really the same. Okay, so now that I'm here, I am going to log in as an administrator. And I'm going to launch, and you notice now I can switch to full screen and really get the full functionalities of my Windows Server 2019. So now, let's take a look at what I have as far as the Windows Server 2019 is concerned. If I look at my dashboard, I'll notice nothing's been configured. If I go to my local server, you notice that I have a randomly generic computer name that Windows created during the installation. I'm in a work group right now. My firewall is enabled. Remote desktop is disabled. NIC CMIC is disabled. And I have a DHCP IP that has been randomly given to me. Okay. And one of the things that we are going to use to configure our Windows server before we can set up a domain controller or Active Directory is the Windows PowerShell. So if I click on Start, you'll notice I have the typical options. I can go to my server manager. I can go to my Windows PowerShell to configure specific things. I can use the Windows PowerShell ISE, which is basically a script editor that allows me to write scripts, use PowerShell, and run various commands that are available in the Windows system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, and I'm going to actually use I'm I'm going to go to start. I'm going to write PowerShell. And the reason I'm running it from start is because I want to run PowerShell as an administrator. So I'm going to right click and I'm going, I don't want to run ISC. I'm going to right click on PowerShell and I'm going to run it as an administrator. And by default, PowerShell is an app. So right now it looks a little small, so we could fix that to change the layout or the font. I'm going to right click, go to properties. I'm going to go to font, put it at 24. And 24 is okay. I think it's big enough where you guys can all see it. Okay, looks pretty good. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to configure my computer or my server name in PowerShell. So to verify this, I'm going to launch my server manager as well, so you guys can see exactly what it is that I am doing here. Right. So if I click on local server, you'll see that my computer name currently is Win LI blah, blah, blah. And if I type in host name in PowerShell, you'll notice that the same thing comes up. And PowerShell is a very powerful built-in tool that Windows have had for quite some time now that is very, in my opinion, underutilized. And most administrators love PowerShell because it really gives you the ability to manage, control, release updates, run scripts to your servers, and really manage exactly what's going on in your environment without having to go directly into the server. Okay, so if I was to write ipconfig, I can get my IP addresses. If I want to write ipconfig/all, I can get all of my, I guess they've eliminated that. But I could run most of the commands that I could actually run in a typical command line, except that the Windows PowerShell is a whole lot more powerful with some of its capabilities. Okay. So let's go back to host name. So the host name of my computer right now is Win blah, blah, blah. Well, Win LIRU4P471QG. That's really a difficult name to remember. So I would love to change that. So to rename my computer, I'm going to do rename, right? And then dash computer. And then I'm going to specify what I want, computer name. So right now, the computer name that I have is WN-IRU4P471QG. Right, and then the new name that I want to give it is dash new name. And then I'm going to give it a new name of forensic 000. Let's not do forensic. Let's just do forensic. Yeah, well, this worked. That's fine. Okay. So now you'll notice that warning, the changes will take effect after you restart the computer. So this is basically letting me know that my computer name has changed and I was able to do it in PowerShell. So what might this be useful? Let's say, for example, you have a bunch of randomly generated computers that happen to join your server, and you wanted to change the domain names of those computers to some kind of order, right? Such as, let's say you're running a department and you have accounting computer 1, computer 2, accounting computer 2, 3, 4, 5, blah, blah, blah. You can actually write a script and deploy this and automatically have it happen in your Windows PowerShell without having to physically go into the server and manually right-click on each computer and doing it one by one. So that is how you can change a computer name using the Windows PowerShell configuration. Now that we know how to do this, let's take a look at our adapter setting. Remember, I told you if I use ipconfig, it will give me what my IP address currently is as far as DHCP is concerned, right? And you can see my DHCP that was assigned for my computer. And I really don't want that. So I'm going to do get-net adapter. And I'm going to see that my net adapter for my Windows machine right now is... I should get a little bit more information than that. Is an Intel R844 net connection, right? So let's do this again. Right, and it gives me a little bit more. This is exactly what I was looking for. I don't know why I kind of cut it off a little bit. Right, so here I get name, Ethernet, and not only do I get that, but I also get the speed that my net adapter has. Right, Ethernet 0. It's an Intel 825 gigabit network. It has an index of 6. It's up. Here's the MAC address, and it's using, well, still MAC address and a speed of 1 gigabit. Okay. So this looks pretty cool. So now what I would like to do is I would actually like to configure my network adapter using PowerShell. So to do that, I am going to essentially do the following. So let's take a look at how we could actually change the host name without doing it through PowerShell. So the typical way you could change the computer name is by coming here, clicking on computer, going to change, and then changing the name right in here. And you notice that by default, it's already forensic 00 because I already ran that command using the PowerShell. So you see it already took effect before I even restart my computer. Okay. So to change the network adapter, I would do the same thing. Go to the Ethernet 0. Click on this, right click on my network adapter, and you notice the configuration came up already, right? Intel, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to go to properties, and then I'm going to go to IPv4 to change my network adapter. So now as you can see, my IP address is automatically obtained through DHCP, and I don't really have a DNS that my server is currently using. So let's take a look at how we can change the network adapter for our Windows Server. So to do that, we would simply come in here and do new -net IP, address -interface index. Again, all of this is information that's right in front of us. So I'm just writing what I see, 6, right? Interface index 6. So I'm just writing the same thing, -IP address, right? Oof, what's the IP address that I'm trying to get? So pretty cool command, but I should have done ipconfig first, right? All right, so here's the IP address. Let's see if it'll let me note. So I actually have to write it all. So it would be new -net IP address -interface index 6 IP address. And the IP I want to change it to is 192.168.107.153. And then I'm going to specify the prefix length, basically meaning how long is it or what's the subnet mask. And in this case, the subnet mask here is 255.255.255. If you recall, in 432, whenever you see 255.255.255, the network or the prefix length is a /24 because it's using 8 bits, 16 bits, 24 bits. So I know that the network length, the prefix length is 24. So I'm going to write 24. And then my default gateway here, default gateway, right? So my default gateway for this system here is going to be 192. So let me come in here. 192.168.107.2. Okay, so that would be my default gateway. All right, and if I did everything correctly and I press enter, all right, this should go through. However, considering that I am not using I'm using the desktop version, some of the PowerShell commands sometimes don't always work and they're limited. Let's press enter, right? And you'll notice that it says new app perimeter cannot be found. The matches perimeter name, blah, blah, blah. IP address, default gateway, invalid argument, new net IP address. It's actually not an invalid argument. Let me see here. Let me see where this came in to say that. Let me click here. New net IP address, interface index 6 IP address 192.168.107.153. Prefix length 24. Default. Oh, I see what I did. I wrote default. I didn't write gateway correctly. Definitely don't make that mistake. Okay, so now we know that it went through, right? So here's how you can tell. And the red basically, similar to most programming systems, will let you know that a mistake was made. But in this case, it says, UNet IP address instant Microsoft already exists at line 1. character 1, 6 already exists. So it's basically telling me that there's a system error because this is a fully qualified Windows system error. So what I have to do here is I have to manually input this command. But this is how you would actually do it if you were not using the user interface in your Windows server. So for your assignment, I want you to write this command and specify which IP address you would be using. And if you want to test it, you can actually download the standard version without the command line, well, I mean, without the user interface, and run this exact system here. So I'm going to click on IPv4 address, and I am going to assign the IP address that I have here to my system. So I'm going to say use the following IP, which is the following 192. So let me come here, 192.168.107. Let me come here because I don't remember. .53. Okay. Is it 153? Yep, 153. Subnet mask 255.255. Default gateway 192.168.107.2. Okay, perfect. Okay. And then the DNS that we want to use, given that we're going to use this server, and this server is going to be a default server, meaning it's going to be a server that's going to use itself, we're going to put 127.0.0.1. So this DNS is going to be a loopback DNS, meaning that we want our server to be set up where the server is configured to talk to itself. So when the server looks for a DNS, the server's DNS will be itself. Okay, so I'm going to click OK, close. So now my server has what is known as a static IP. So if I click back, I right click and go to properties, and I go to IPv4 properties, you will notice that my server has a static IP that's been assigned to it. Okay. The last thing we're going to do is we will set the client's DNS server just to show you exactly how this actually works. All right. So I'm going to run one more command in PowerShell just to show you. And this time I'm going to run the command to set up the DNS in PowerShell. So I'm going to do set -DNS client server address dash interface, same exact thing, interface index 6 dash server address, and I'm going to write 127.0.0.1. Let me see where I made the mistake here. Interface. Oh, I wrote interface wrong. Okay, so now you notice that this went through, right? Set DNS client server address dash interface index 6 dash server address 127.0.1. And how do I know it went through? Let's take a look, right? If you recall, I changed this back to its generic DHCP. And if I go to properties, you will notice that the following DNS server has been assigned to it based on what I did here in my PowerShell. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to enter the IP address that I wanted to use. 168.07.2, and okay. So now I was able to really configure some of the most important things in my server using the command, the PowerShell, right? So now that I have this, the only thing that's left for me to do, I renamed my computer, I set up my static, is to shut my system down and restart it. So I'm going to run a shutdown -R to shut down my system. It's going to say you're about to be signed out. Windows will shut down in less than a minute. Are you sure you want to do this? I'm going to close. And in less than a minute, my Windows server will restart and all of the configurations I set will take effect, right? So what did I didn't mean to press pause. So what I essentially did here was I used PowerShell to do a lot of things in my Windows server, right? I renamed my computer. I was able to pull my network adapter. I set static IP. I set my DNS through the utilization of my PowerShell configuration. And as you can tell, my Windows is restarting with the shutdown -R. and it will, all the new configurations that I set will take effect once my Windows Server turns itself back on. All right. Thank you for watching.